Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SD Times Live Microwebinar series. This series is with a testing company called mabl, and in today's live, we'll be continuing our discussion on various testing topics. Today, we'll be talking about the benefits of running test automation on the cloud. With me today is Joe Lust, staff software engineer at mabl, and now I'll kick things over to him.
Thanks, Jen. So, as you can see from the slides here, today we're talking about the benefits of running test automation in the cloud. And I would ask everybody, since you're joining us for the webinar, if you have any questions as we go along, please just throw your questions or feedback in the chat here. We'd love to address them. So, quick aside about myself. I am Joe Lust. I'm a software engineer here at mabl, where I'm the DevOps and security lead. And what I've really spent the last 6 years doing is automating all the testing processes that we can imagine in the cloud. And as somebody that works in DevOps, one thing has stood out to me, and that is that DevOps is rapidly accelerating the speed at which we develop and deploy code. In fact, in the last year, 75% of development teams said that they had sped up the process of their shipping code, that they were operating at a higher velocity. That's 3 out of 4 teams. And the challenge is we can't just ship code and product. We need to ship quality. We need to ship a quality user experience because the customer experience reigns supreme. A few stats, for example, show that if you don't have a quality product, you're going to lose those customers. For example, 1 in 3 customers say they'll walk away from the brand they love because of one negative experience. And 81% of companies, that's 4 out of 5, say that they compete on their customer experience alone. And finally, 1 in 2 US consumers say that they'd switch away from a tool or an app they love because they want better quality. So think about that. Have you ever shipped a bug before? Has your checkout or login broken? How many customers did you lose because of that lapse in quality, a lapse in the user experience? And that begs the question, how are companies managing these competing pressures around quality? And at mabl, we believe the answer is cloud-based testing, the topic today. And how can the cloud help? Well, we'll just touch on 5 ways. It can expand our test coverage. It can help us run at a higher scale, which also helps that coverage. It can help us shift left, help us move quality earlier in the development process. It can help us fix the issues we find even faster. And finally, it can really help improve the team efficiency around quality. Let's dive into those. So let's contrast the traditional approach with the cloud approach. Traditionally, in the non-cloud world, we were pretty limited in what we could test. We had finite resources, finite computers to test on, finite time to make tests because they took a lot of time. So we couldn't cover every path through those applications. We usually just touched on the happy path, even though there's many more paths available. And the attributes of these sorts of testing solutions were that you had many disparate tools, something disparate to handle API, another tool for accessibility, another tool for performance, another tool for UI tests. And we had to manage and collate all these different tools and results. And finally, we had limitations around the environments we could test because it was cumbersome to take one testing tool and point it against all the different environments that you deploy against, maybe from integration to QA to UAT to staging and production. So that meant that we really, overall, big picture, couldn't get a lot of coverage of our tests, and it took a lot of time to test. But let's pivot to the cloud. What's it look like in the cloud? Well, in the cloud, we have practically unlimited scale. So modern cloud-based testing solutions like mabl let you use data-driven testing. What's that mean? You can literally upload a spreadsheet full of permutations for your tests and run one test 500 different ways. And remember, your customers, they don't just use Chrome on your QA department's laptop, right? They use all sorts of different browsers. They use Firefox, they use Edge, they use Safari. They're on different operating systems. We also need to test those scenarios. And taken together, all those data-driven scenarios and all those browsers mean we can test at a much higher scale, and we can test the user experience for everybody that's using your application to make sure that they all have a good experience. Another attribute of the cloud-based testing is that we can use a unified tool, a unified platform, for example, like mabl, where it's one tool for UI, API, accessibility, and performance testing. So we don't go make those tests in 4 different tools. We can just make them in one place. We can use our browser tests as performance tests. We can really harness the power of those tests we've created. And finally, the environments are much easier to work with in cloud-based tools. For example, you have tight integration with your CI/CD tools like Jenkins or GitHub. And you can start testing early in all those stages as we shift left. You can start testing in dev. You can start testing every commit. We get much higher coverage in the environments you can run as well because of the scale of the cloud. So let me double click on that, just the speed aspect, because the cloud has basically unlimited compute resources. That's what I think of as an engineer, is we're building mabl, and we're trying to release that to the customer. We're not stuck in the bureaucracies of large companies like I used to work in, where you wanted to run a test and then 6 months later you got more machines to run those tests, right? It was slow, it was bureaucratic. Well, in the cloud, we just ask for 1,000 computers, we get them, we use them, we're done, right? And that's how you can run your tests very, very fast in the cloud. You have 1,000 tests, spin up 1,000 test runners, run them, finish. You literally get your tests run in the fastest possible time by using the scale of the cloud. Additionally, we touched on reuse a minute ago, right? Once you make one test, let's use it everywhere. And that's where we talk about multiple environments. Being able to test, for example, in an ephemeral environment. Test every commit your engineers make. You can see here an example with mabl. We have a tight integration with GitHub. So let's test that commit. Let's test that pull request. Let's test in an ephemeral environment. Test it everywhere. Get great utility out of those tests you've created. Additionally, we've got tools like the mabl CLI here. If you can run a command line somewhere, you can run your tests on your laptop, in your CI/CD pipeline. Run your tests everywhere. Get the most results and the most leverage from those tests you've spent time investing in. Additionally, let's think about the cloud. Remember, unbounded scale? So let's collect all the possible resources we can about the test you ran. Historically, I think back to using tools like Jenkins. A test failed. Okay, let me go find the right Jenkins machine. Let me go find the right test, click through a bunch. Okay, let me find the log. Let me scroll to line 600 and start reading and try to figure out what went wrong. Well, that's the pre-cloud way of testing. In the cloud, we can record tons of information about every test, about every click in every test. So for example, here in mabl, we can see that here is a test that unfortunately failed. We can see at step 33 here why it failed. And we can even go deeper. We can see the screenshot of what it looked like when it failed. We can get the network traffic. We can get the actual HTML that was in the page the moment that the test had an issue. We can even go and get basically the memory dump out of Chrome, the step trace, and load that up and see what happened. That means that all that time you spent trying to reproduce a test case, you can save, because you have incredible detail about tests and why they might have had an issue, and you can very easily fix them. With the great detail and the great ease of looking into your tests across all those tons of tests you might be running, you now can get them fixed faster than ever using the scale of the cloud. Additionally, when you think of cloud software, you think of everything being synchronized and working all the time, right? Well, historically, remember, we had all sorts of tests. They might be on Sarah's laptop or Frank's computer. They might be getting emailed to you or a thumb drive or on a shared network drive, right? It was hard to consolidate all these tests, all these reports. But in the cloud, everybody is on one synchronized platform. For example, in mabl, folks can log in. They can see all your tests, how everything's running. They can edit the tests. Everybody is on the same page. Not just that, with tight integrations, you can see quality everywhere that a quality practitioner works. You can get results directly in Slack, in Teams. You can see their quality reports and the tests directly in GitHub and pull requests. You can see them directly in Jira and in your issues and your tickets. And that's what you think of when you think of cloud, right? Everything just works. Everything is synchronized, and everybody can collaborate together efficiently on one tool. But don't just take my word for it. Here, for example, is a case study with a mabl customer, Delta Dental, where they found that there was an 89% reduction in test execution time using that scale of the cloud we just talked about. They found that their developers were more engaged in testing because in many ways they could more easily access quality and everybody could share tests. And they found that the detailed reports available to them enabled continuous improvement because it was really easy to find out what was going on, what was working, what needed to be fixed. They didn't have to go and dig through logs anymore. And these are the sorts of benefits you'd expect from a cloud-based testing tool. But let me wrap up with just a quick overview of mabl. mabl is the leader in low-code test automation, and in part because we're leveraging the cloud. We're testing in the cloud, we're using AI and ML auto-healing capabilities, and we're integrating with the DevOps pipelines. And this is how we built such a great tool based on the pillars of coverage. As we mentioned, you want to test everything, everywhere. Shift left, cover your APIs, your UIs, your performance testing, test accessibility. Also built on scalability. We want to run all your tests, as many as we can, as fast as we can, and we want to give you easy access to that body of information. And finally, tight integration. You need your quality tools and your reporting and your tests to be available wherever you are, to have that single pane of glass, and to have your CI/CD tools, and to have your quality management tools, to have everything come together to help everybody collaborate easily. But don't just take my word for it. I personally find that we have some of the most enthusiastic customers. And why? Because they're seeing great results. They're able to create great products more quickly. And here are some stats we collected from them. For example, Arch Insurance saw 70% reduction in their maintenance time. CareerBuilder.com saw a 3x increase in the speed at which they could create tests through low code. ITS saw an 80% cost savings over running traditional Selenium tests. And JetBlue saw a 10x speed up using that power and scale of the cloud to running their tests. These are just a few examples of why our customers find testing in the cloud to be such an excellent solution. But that's the time I'd allotted, so I'll pause. I'll take some questions from folks, but I hope you got a good understanding of why testing in the cloud, moving your test automation to modern cloud tooling, really does have so many benefits.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. That was a really great presentation. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, so we don't have time for a Q&A, but if anyone does have any questions, you can feel free to reach out and we'll get those answered for you. And this episode was the final in the Microwebinar series, so if you missed any of the previous 6, then you can go back and watch them all now because the series is complete. Yeah, that's it. See y'all later.
Thanks, Jen.